Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off, where we put 3 magazines offerings against each other to see who had the best. In this episode we're looking at February of 1993, and the combatants are the One For Amiga, Amiga Power and Amiga Format. Fight! First up is Amiga Power, who provides us with a single disc with 2 demos and a full PD game. The first demo from this simple but effective menu is Arabian Nights. This is a game by Chrysalis Software, who made a game that we reviewed in the past, Soccer Kid. And you might see hints of that through this. It starts off with this basic title screen with music that sounds, well, to be honest, a little bit broken. But it's not the only thing that seems a bit broken, as when we get into the game we find that intro text is barely legible, with it being this pink with white border that just blends into that pinkish background. The basic idea is that, well, you've been locked up in the cell and you need to escape. Thankfully, someone just left the key lying around, which doesn't seem too smart. Though with that flaming pit just outside the door, I'm not sure it really needed to be locked in the first place. The basic movement of our hero is decent, if a little bit slippery. It's pretty clear to see, or at least feel, that Soccer Kid was built on this tech, as it does feel very similar. But the actual gameplay isn't all that bad. You have this sword that you can attack with, and you can enter doors and holes in walls to find extra gems. Those are actually needed, as you have to trade them to get the rigid snake. No sniggering at the back, please. And you can use that to free a prisoner, who has the weirdest arms ever. But he also happened to have a set of lockpicks that allow you to finish the level. Which is pretty cool and all, as it means it's not your average platformer. It's more an adventure platformer, similar but better done in some ways than Dizzy, as at least you have better control over your character. And once you do find the exit, you'll find yourself on the second level, which is a minecart race, which is actually possible for you to lose your wheels in, and you have to then go around on foot. I'm not sure if the full game forces you to do this as well, or it's possible that there's some way of freeing the cart and getting your wheels back, but I didn't quite work that one out. The next game is Atom Smashers, which is a full PD title. And it has the most PD menu that's ever PD'd its way out of the PD mines. And going with the single player, we find something that looks very much like Bomberman, or Dynablaster as it happened to be known on the Amiga. But there's no bombs here. Instead you have to push the blocks to hit those weird looking enemies. It's a little bit fiddly as the monsters move around in almost unpredictable ways, but after a little bit you do get the hang of it. And then you hit the second level to find, well, Madonna in the middle. And lemmings? There are less pushable blocks on this level, so you do have to be far more careful, as those baddies that you can see on screen don't match the kill count that you can see on the HUD. And quickly you realise why. More will spawn in. And on top of that, these are a special kind of lemmings, the exploding kind, which will send shockwaves in the cardinal directions that, well, unsurprisingly, you have to avoid. Thankfully, it does class as a death, so if you can avoid all of them, then the level will pretty much finish itself. And the game will then continue to introduce new monsters and a few other tile types as well. So there is actually quite a lot of play in this game. But there's also something that we on this channel really do enjoy, a level editor, which strangely is locked behind a password. So let's check the magazine and wait, what? They're not going to give the password till the next month? That's a bit annoying, isn't it? Well, thankfully, looking it up online, I was able to find out what it is anyway. And here we can see the full level editor. You can actually change every single level in the game. So you can actually make up your own level packs, as you can save them out if you wanted to. Now, trying to work out how to use this thing from first principles may not be the best way. Try and find a doc that will list all the keys, as it does have quite a few of them. But once you work it all out, it's actually a lot of fun, and it's really nicely designed. So all in all, this is a really nice little PD game. And the last demo on this disc is Alien 3, which gives us a proper title screen and everything, in which you can even go into the options and set the number of lives to 9. It's not really needed for a one level demo, of which it just happens to be the first level of the game as well, so it shouldn't be the hardest, but it is quite nice. Now, this game is probably more well known for its Mega Drive version than the Amiga, but they are pretty much the same, just this one is slightly pared down. The goal is to free all those wriggling people, but you'll also have to shoot up a lot of aliens to get that far, and you do get quite the arsenal to do it with. You get the pulse rifle, the flamethrower, a missile launcher, and grenades. All of them have their own ammo amounts, and you'll have to try and find ammo pickups in the level. Now, outside the aliens, possibly the most difficult thing in this world are the ladders, as it's really picky where you have to stand to be able to climb them. But thankfully, with that rocket launcher, doors aren't all that much of a problem, as you can just blow them away, which is a pretty cool touch. As is the vents, as you can crawl into them and it will then block out the rest of the level. So you're not quite sure what's going on out there, but you have to pay attention to what's going on inside, because those aliens, yep, they will be in there as well. It's a relatively easy demo, and it should only take a couple of attempts at most to be able to track down all those wriggling people. It's a game that I have actually played the full version of, and, well, I've pretty much played the same amount of it as I've done this demo. This first level is usually more than enough for me. The next contestant is the One For Amiga issue 53, which came with 2 discs and 3 demos. First up is Dark Seed, which, if you've never heard of it, is a point-and-click adventure that is based on the artwork of H.R. Giger. Now, he only allowed this game to be made if it was done in high resolution mode, which, if you know the Amiga, that means interlaced mode. So if you see some flickering or some random lines going on in the screen, that's why. This demo is missing the very impressive otherworldly intro, so when you start off, well, you're a little bit lost, with the main character complaining about having a thumping headache. And after listening to this music for a little bit too long, I think it's given me one as well. So let's both of us go out to try and find some painkillers. This demo is a little bit more interesting than you might expect, as it's not got the same layout as the full game. Because if you go through the bathroom, then go out the other door, you'll find yourself in the living room, which was on the ground floor in the final release. So they have messed around with it a little bit to give you a more self-contained demo. And they had to include the living room because of the mirror, because if you touch it, it will lead you into the other world, which is all based on Giger's work. as you can see all this really great weirdness going on. Now the weird thing with this one is there's no real ending, as it's just running on a timer, one that you have no idea how much longer you've got left, and when it finishes, well, you'll get one of those many deaths from the game. Nice. The second disc is, well, quite special, as the first game is Universal Monsters. Not heard of it? Well, I'm not surprised, as it never got released. The game itself actually looks quite polished as a demo, as we've seen some really rough ones in the past. And this turns out to be an isometric adventure game, which is a style of game that I've never really gotten on with. And this one really isn't changing my opinion, as there's a lot of instant death moments all around you from the very start. As you might have guessed, this is based on the various monster movies from Universal Studios. And it really does look quite nice. That transition effect when you move between screens is really good. The whole thing looks quite nice and detailed, but I have no idea what it is that you need to do, or where you're going, or anything really, because I don't really tend to last too long when I'm moving around. I managed to find some random items and some keys, but where they're used, no idea. What I do find quite interesting was that this was planned for both the Amiga and Atari. And in the end, all we got was this demo, an advert, and even some magazine reviews of it at the time. And then, nothing. It just vanished, like a monster. Which is the exact same thing that happened to the other demo on this disc, Superhero. And I'll say this from the start, the controls in this is really bad. Walking around is very slow, but jumping is really fast and difficult to control. What a great combination that is. So what else would you do in a demo that will take time for you to learn the controls of? Well, you'd give you a level that is basically a huge pit and require you to get to grips with that jumping from the very start. Well done, team, well done. And working out what you can stand on and what will hurt you is the main challenge of this game, or at least that first part of the demo anyway. And after you eventually make your way across this building, and find these platforms that appear out of thin air, which may or may not be his superpower, at this point I don't know, you finally get to fight some baddies, which is fine enough. You'd think it'd actually be more engaging than it actually is, based on the fact you have quite a range of moves, but they don't really get a look in, as it's one of those combat systems where you have to hold down the button, then push a direction to do one of the moves. So instead you can just keep spamming the button and it'll just punch, and for the most part that will win most of the fights. You can hold it down to do this ranged attack, but I don't think it actually does much damage. Like the previous game, this also got an advert, which even showed off what the box art was going to be. So they must have been really quite close to finishing it before they dropped it. I wonder if the response from these demos or the previews were quite poor, and he decided it just wasn't worth bringing it out. And if that was the case, then I can believe them, because after playing this demo and that previous one, I wouldn't have been in a rush to go out and buy the full games. And this leads us on to the final magazine, Amiga Format issue 43. And I have to say, picking the third magazine was hard this month. The first disc is a database program, which we've seen is quite common for Amiga Format to include these serious programs. They also provide in-depth articles explaining how to use them, which is quite good. And this month, well, it's no different. But someone really felt they needed to spice up the article. As well, this is their way of saying a database can be useful, as you get to store the musician's address and phone number in it. I totally have no idea why they might go with that picture and all. At the end of the day, this is a database program. You can put data in, you can password protect it, and you can get your data out. It's not all that special. So instead, let's jump on to the second disc, where we'll find 4 separate things. The first is a program that will turn dpaint artwork into sprites as part of that dpack programming tutorial which they were running with Bullfrog. The other is quite interesting as it's a game patch for Alien Breed Special Edition. That's right, back in 1993, magazines were including game patches. And this fixed up a crash on one of the later levels on the initial run of the game. And before we can check out the 2 main demos on this disc, we'll have to do something that's also a first for this channel, as we'll have to get some blank discs, as those 2 programs will actually decompress those demos onto their own separate discs. You have to do this as you can't run the demos directly from the cover disc itself. So as you can imagine, there's lots of warnings about copy protect this disc, make sure you don't overwrite it, going on in the installer. Now this was something that actually became quite popular, as it allowed them to do more demos, or at least do the same amount as the actual product got bigger. So with it decompacted onto its own floppy disks, let's give them a go. And first up is Bart vs. the World. And for this we're off to China, where I'm amazed that Bart isn't having to apologise for saying something completely innocent that upset an entire government. And here we have 5 different minigames that we can play. The first one is a platforming game on a boat, and what you have to do is, well, anyone's guess. But you can explore the craft, collecting the various items, and then if you make your way down to the rudder, you can find Maggie. The best bit though is when you take a wild leap off one of the sides and you manage to collect one of the Bartman power-ups. That'll let you fly around the level instead. And after doing all that exploring and then throwing some cherry bombs at the locals, you manage to find yourself next to this map icon, which will take you back to the main selection screen. A card matching minigame is the next one, but it's a bit harder than you'd think because you only have a limited number of failed guesses, which you can burn out very quickly, as well this is pure guesswork to start with. The cards are all classic Simpsons characters, or at least from the first 2 seasons, and well, I'm not all too sure what this has to do with China. The same can also be said for the next minigame, which is your basic slot machine. One which I'm not sure you actually have all that much control over. The second minigame that is at least China themed is the Great Wall, in which you get to skateboard down, all while avoiding fire breathing dragons, the locals, as well as these massive gaps. But you'll also need to avoid the bugs, as the magazine warns you that if you land badly, the game does have a good chance of hanging. But they do at least say they'll fix it for the final release. And finally, the last minigame is that classic, the slide picture puzzle, that I swear is laid out wrong, as it has the empty square in the top left hand spot, rather than in the bottom right. I'm not wrong in thinking that it's usually in the bottom right, yeah? Well, either way, there was once upon a time that I actually used to be quite good at these, but that is long gone now. I can get just about to the end, and then there's always 2 that's in the wrong place, and I can just never get them right. Now I have no idea how all these mini-games come together for that final release, so I think it's fair to say that this demo didn't really impress all that much. Which means we're on to our final game of the episode, which is Noddy's Playtime. Which is slightly rare for the cover discs, as this is a game that's aimed purely at the younger kids. From the bouncy music to its very colourful title screen, this is the complete opposite of Darkseid that we played earlier. Now from the menu we get to play one of 2 activities. The first is the Arc, where we have to solve these simplified puzzles. Just put the bits in the right order and the animal will show up on the Arc. It's all very simple, and I don't think many kids would find this all too difficult. But when you do finish it, you'll get to see the Arc set sail with some nicely animated animals all jumping around. The other activity is a paint program, where you get to select one of 2 different pictures to colour in. You can use the standard fill option, which makes it a bit paint by numbers, or you can select one of the other tools in the box. Now it's obviously not going to replace Deluxe Paint anytime soon, but it is very much on par for the course for these types of kid games. And with just those 2 activities, with each being quite lean, it's weird that they needed to decompress this out to a full floppy disk. As we've played other demos that were much larger than this and sat with other games as well. And so with all those games played, what's the final result? Well, in last place I think it has to go to Amiga Format. Neither demo was great and The Simpsons was a little buggy as well. Second place is the One For Amiga. 2 failed games that I didn't really enjoy playing, and that headache-inducing demo made for an interesting if flawed game. So first place has to be Amiga Power. That PD game was an absolute joy, and Arabian Nights really does show some real promise, and it's a game I've wanted to play as well. Until next time, I've been the Goldfish. That was a record for demos that never got full releases, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thank you for watching Cover Disc Face Off. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you should be able to find 2 other videos on the screen right now. Or you might even want to subscribe or even ring that bell icon, because that's what I've been told that you need to do. So until next time, thank you and goodbye.